In the next series of videos, we're going to take a look at intents and intent filters, and specifically we're going to look at implicit intents. Surely you've heard the phrase before, don't reinvent the wheel. And that's especially true when we get to Android programming, because you have to think about the triangle that I showed earlier, where you have time, quality, and functionality, or features if you prefer, and you pick any two. That's a little alteration of the traditional triangle in software development that says time, money, and quality, pick any two. But we need to think about how we can put quality as definitely one of those options and still get a lot of functionality into our applications and do it in a timely manner. So we need to find ways to be efficient. And one way is to, guess what? Don't reinvent the wheel. So in the next series of lectures, there'll probably be several that follow this. We're going to look at using implicit intents to invoke components that already exist on the Android operating system and get data back from them. Our last series of lectures talked about explicit intents, where we call something locally within our program directly. We say exactly what we want to do. This is implicit intents, where we're typically calling something outside of our program. Let me show you a few examples from the Plant Places application. This is the Plant Places application running in an emulator. I'll show you a few examples. First of all, search by color is the real bread and butter of the app. This is the real selling point over the other plant apps that exist. And I'll tell you a major mistake I made when I made the very first version of this. I spent way too much time trying to get the camera to take a picture because I was trying to do it all myself with code. It ends up, it only really takes about 4 lines because what I do is I call an external service that invokes the camera. So I'm going to hit take new photo. It might take a moment. And this is going to go to the emulator in the Android system. And I will tell you a major word of caution. If you're doing anything with the camera, it's really best to debug on your own device because the camera emulator in the Android AVD is painful. As a matter of fact, if you do have a project that uses the camera emulator and it doesn't work perfectly, as long as you've set it up well, that's good enough for me. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and snap this picture. And I'm going to click. It's a little bit off screen. Let me recenter this and bring it down on screen. Okay, so I just clicked here. Now I'm going to click the checkbox to say that's the image that I want. It's going to go back to the original screen and show me a little thumbnail of this image. And also, if you take a look, the plantplaces.com mobile color index algorithm now goes and finds the top 16 colors, up to 16 colors from this image. Because this is an emulated image, there are only 3 colors. But that whole sequence didn't really take much to do once I figured out I could do it with an implicit intent. Similarly, I spent a lot of time writing something that would search the file system for images. I mean, I wrote a humongous class to do this. And then I realized I didn't have to do that. I was making it way too hard on myself. I can choose open existing image, and sorry, I have the debugger going. I just need to play this point through. So this is the live. If you go to the Google Play Store, this is the actual plantplaces.com application. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any images loaded onto this emulator, but what it would do, just like going to your gallery view, you could select a picture from here, and then it would come back and it would do that same color index. Both of these things only took a few lines of code. Think seriously about that. I've looked at a lot of the design documents that were submitted for the projects this term, and a lot of them talked about doing something with, say, media, playing some kind of music or some kind of tone. A lot of them talked about taking a picture. These are things where you really need to think about implicit intents. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, of course, with the app, what I can do is I can click on this and I can get a list of plants that match this color. Given that we have a camera emulator, I didn't really get a nice diversity of colors, but nonetheless, I am connected to the network, and so it should show me some colors or some plants here. Since it is the emulator, it is going to run a little bit more slowly than if it were on an actual phone. Again, always good to use the phone. Most of these, what's funny is because I clicked on a gray, most of these things that we see coming up are known for their bark, like the Pinus mungiana. So there I took a picture of the bark, and that's what matched the gray that we were looking at. So that's one use of intents. That's what we call an implicit intent that's going to call some activity of an external program. Right now it's just pulling up a web view of plantplaces.com. That's what we're going to call an implicit intent. There are actually three things. Let me go back. I'll tell you what. While this is rendering, let me go to our presentation. An intent object indicates an intention to do something. And there are actually a few things we can do. Let me readjust this again. So an intent object, a passive data structure holding an abstract description of an operation to be performed, or often in the case of broadcasts, a description of something that has happened and is being announced. So that's a lot of words. That's a lot of vague words if you're not used to what an intent is. And honestly, it took me a while to get my arms around what exactly an intent is. An intent allows you to specify the action you want to take and how or who the system will respond. Okay, now on the top item, we really break intents into two different things. An abstract description of an operation to be performed. What does that mean? That means the camera view, the gallery view, like we just looked at. Something we want to do. Take a picture or look at an image gallery. Those are two things that we want to do. But now let's look at the other half. Or, often in the case of broadcasts, a description of something that has happened and is being announced. It honestly took me a long time to figure a business case for this until I was talking to a fellow Android programmer. This is what's called a broadcast receiver. And he told me it was one of the things he really loved about Android programming, the use of broadcast receivers. So you can set up a broadcast receiver that will receive intents when something happens. By something happens, I mean plugged in and charging. I mean connected via Wi-Fi, these kind of things. So it can tell you when certain things happen to your phone. One of the things I love about my phone with Bluetooth is I can play some music on it when I'm in my truck, and the Bluetooth automatically engages. As soon as I shut off the truck, the phone also turns off the music because it notices it lost the Bluetooth connection. And that's a broadcast receiver. It says, oh, okay, I'm no longer on Bluetooth and I don't want to embarrass the user and play music really loud. Same thing if I disconnect my headphone jack. It says, oh, okay, well, the headphone jack has been disconnected. I'm going to stop playing music right now. All of this stuff happens automatically. Let me give you a good use case for that on Plant Places again. And by the way, here's the little web view that comes up and shows us the Pinus mungiana, the lacebark pine. If I go back, I'm going to go back to the main menu, which is going to be a few clicks back. Let's think about the big design concepts behind Android. We have enchant me, amaze me, simplify my life. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but that's what we consider. Oops, looks like I maybe clicked the wrong button. Let me keep going back until I hit the main menu. So simplify, amaze, enchant. Now let's focus on simplify. We don't want to make the user's job difficult. We want to avoid clutter. There's something on Plant Places Mobile that bothers me a little bit. If we go to GPS a Plant, and this is the screen that we're making in our demos. If we go to GPS a Plant, it's going to bring up a screen here like the one we're working on, where we can select a plant, and then we can GPS the plant. We can take photos of the plant. What you're going to see is that I have a series of buttons here, and I worked for a long time to try to figure out how to reduce the number of buttons. And honestly, there are too many. I'm not comfortable with it. There are too many. We have a pause GPS, which is more like a kick GPS. It kind of tells the GPS to refresh itself. We have select a plant, just like what we're doing on our own app, where we can go in and we can associate a plant with a GPS. Now, here's the one that bothers me. Save to phone and upload. So the idea is you can use this offline. You can use it when you're not network connected, and you can save the plant to the phone. And that works great because many times when I use this app, I'm out of the country, I don't have network connection, and that's my best choice to save to the phone. But it's the upload button that bothers me. The idea was that once I'm back in, the US, I can synchronize with plantplaces.com. And I do use that all the time. It's a very good feature. If I had this to do over again, which probably eventually I'll refactor this, I would change the save to phone to just say save. I would remove the upload button entirely. What I would do instead is use a broadcast receiver. And remember what that does. That's something that listens for events like connected to Bluetooth, not connected to Bluetooth, plugged in charging, not plugged in charging, headphones plugged in, headphones not plugged in. What I would do, I shouldn't require the user to press an upload button. What I would do in that case, I would wire up a broadcast receiver that says when I'm plugged in and charging, so I'm not draining the battery, and when I'm over Wi-Fi, so I'm not using data, automatically upload. Automatically do it. So anytime we can automatically do something on our app without causing the user to go in and do some manual activity, that's a bonus. And that's what I would do. Save to phone and upload is just too confusing. I would just have it say save, remove the upload button entirely, and just listen for those events of plugged in charging and on Wi-Fi. That means when you go to bed, when you're at home, when your Wi-Fi is connected, you plug in your phone, it automatically does the synchronization. And that makes this screen much simpler. So that's a good use case for a broadcast receiver. Okay, and here we go. A little description of what we do with intents. I just talked about broadcast receivers. That's when we're telling events that have occurred or we're listening for events that have occurred. The other one at the top is the activity. We've seen this one a lot before, calling one screen from another. The difference is with an implicit intent, we're going to be calling something on board the Android phone, like the camera or something like that. We can also set up our apps to receive intents, and that's something that we're going to do here as well. I kind of do like the search by color feature. I probably have said that a few times now. Boy, it could in theory be used for more than just plants, right? I mean, it would be nice to be able to take that functionality, search by color, have it search anything, and return the top 16 colors. This is something that I would like to offer as an implicit intent for other apps. So other apps can come right into this activity. Maybe they can send a photo in, and then this activity will index that photo for its top 16 colors and return the result. So that's something that we'll experiment with as well. We'll pull this back down. There we go. And click OK. That's something we'll experiment with as well. How can we not only call implicit intents, but how can we set ourselves up to receive implicit intents? Okay, the one in the middle is a service. We'll talk about this a little bit later as well. A service is something like GPS. It's something that we can subscribe to. So that's something else we can do with intents. Activity, service, and broadcast receiver. Okay, types of intents, we've talked about this before. We have explicit, where we're explicitly defining a target. We're saying, I want to call my activity.class. Okay, it ignores action, data, and category, which we don't know about yet, but we're about to see. So explicit intents are the kind of intents we've been using so far. We explicitly name a target or what we want to do. Implicit intents do not name a target. Instead, we name an action, which is just the concept of what we want to do. We also will define a category that says kind of another filter, but how do we want to do this? Optionally, we can pass in data and type. We'll see an example of this a little bit later. If you want to do, say, a music player, or even just play a little bit of music, or a camera, or anything like that, you'll use that data and type to specify where to find the music and what type of music to find. Okay, the action will say something like, I wish to play music, or I wish to upload music, or something like that. That's kind of how these fall. So implicit intent has action, data, and category, but not target. We just say what we want to do. We let the Android system or the user figure out how to do it. Explicit intent, we do specify a target, not an action, data, and category, and we go exactly to that target. Okay, so intent is a bundle of information. It contains information of interest to the component that receives the intent, the action, and the data. So listen to music would be an action. Data would be where to find the music, what type of music, MP3 or WAV, whatever type of music you want. For an image, we might say, here's our image folder, and we want to look for GIFs and JPEGs and PNGs and whatever we would want. Then we have that optional thing called a category, which might narrow down more closely what exactly we want to do. And finally, extras are any extra data we wish to pass along. What I'm going to do in our exercise when we take the search by color and we make it available via an implicit intent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify an action, which will be something like color index or something like that. Literally, it's just a string. It's just a string that says what we want to do. I'm also going to accept an extra, which is something like a file path to an image. So you call me with that action. You pass in an extra that tells me where I can find an image. I will open it up and display it to you. Okay, and then pick the top 16 colors. Okay, some examples of actions: call, initiate a phone call; edit, kind of like opening Notepad or something like that; main, start an activity, something like that. There's several. This is just a little sample, but on Blackboard I have links where you can see even more of them. Data we talked about. It's going to have things like a type, audio MP3. It's going to have data might be a path. Here we have a fairly long path. We're saying content. We're giving it kind of like a URL look and feel is what we're doing. So each data element can specify a URI and data type. There's separate attributes: scheme, like we saw content; host, where is it; port. So if we had an address, this would be an address of an apartment building. The port would be the mailbox number. Okay, so where do we want to go? Once we're there, specifically, where do we want to go inside of that? That's pretty normal to TCP/IP networking. You can have something like plainplaces.com. Port 80 is where you go for web traffic, but email would go to another port like port 25. So both are hosted on plainplaces.com, but the port tells it what we actually want to do. See the web? FTP would be port 21. Email, usually port 25, something like that. So with one domain name, there are lots of different things it can do, and the port number tells us what those different things are. And then a path, okay, where we're going to go to find what we want once we get to this host and port. Okay. Data type is honestly really dependent on what you want to do. We see we can use a wildcard to say all audio. For me, I used a wildcard to say all images from the image path. So with the gallery view, I want to look at all images, so I just said images and then asterisk. Didn't really care what type of image it is: PNG, GIF, JPEG, JPEG bitmap. I could limit it, or I could use that wildcard to say I want all images. So I could limit it to just image JPG, or if I did image / asterisk, it would show me all. Similar for audio. You could do audio / MP3 to show only MPGs, or audio asterisk to show them all. We see video, there's several others that we have here. So data type, it's hard to make many generalizations about this because this is oftentimes used with multimedia, sounds, images, movie clips, things like that. It's really context sensitive. This is a case where if you want to play audio or you want to show an image, you probably want to look for a couple of examples of what it's doing. Category is really tricky. Category is just kind of an additional way we can filter down what we want to do. You can either specify when you are making an activity that will receive implicit intents. You can either define a category or not define a category. But if you choose to not define a category, you must include the category default. As one of your options. So category, that one's kind of hard. The one that we'll see here is the category launcher. Now let me show with that in mind, let me show you something you might not know. Believe it or not, you've already specified an intent filter. And so what I'm going to do is go to our application from this term, and I'm going to go to the file. I did this off camera, so I'll show it. So I'm hourglassing now. As soon as that comes back, I'll show it. Okay, I went to Android Manifest XML. That Android Manifest XML tells us about our project. It's basically configuration for our project. And we have this nice handy view like this. But if I click on Android Manifest XML, and then Control M, we can actually look at the XML file under the covers. This is an activity, okay? This is an activity that we have set up with an intent filter, just as we would set up an activity that we want to receive implicit events. And we said that we need to specify at least an action and a category. If we don't specify a category, we have to just say category default. But those are two things we're going to have to specify when we're setting up an action, or an activity rather, to receive implicit intents. In this case, the activity is our GPS plant activity, and this was created for us. Within the activity, we see that the Android system added this intent filter tag. Within that, an action named main and a category named launcher. Why is that important? Every Android app will have this, an activity with an action named main and a category named launcher. Every Android app will have this because that's a flag that says this is the activity I want to start. When the user enters the app, this is the activity I want the user to see. Main means it's the startup. We should only have one activity with an intent filter of type main. Okay. Category launcher means it can be called from the launcher. It can be called from the Android launcher, from the operating system. So every Android app that the user can start should have an intent filter with an action and a category, and that says this is the app I'm going to start. Okay. You see that we've also defined our other activities that we've created so far this term. We have not given them intent filters though, and that's because we're calling them with explicit intents, not implicit intents. In a future video, we'll see how we can set up our activities to receive implicit intents by using an intent filter. But if you see an activity configured like this without an intent filter, that probably means it's being invoked with an explicit intent. Okay. Other things we have our uses SDK. We also have our Android version. So uses SDK says the minimum SDK levels we will support and our target that we will support. The app version is a version that we'll see on the Google Play Store. Right now, Plant Places Mobile is on app version 7 and 7.1. Every time we upload a new APK, okay, the APK is the built Android project. Every time we upload a new APK, we have to increment this version. Okay, so if we take a look, what we're finally going to get when we build the project is going to be this APK. That's what we upload to the Google Play Store. One other advantage we have as Android developers, as opposed to our friends in the Apple world, is that you can make an APK available via a link or an email. So if you want to maybe have a beta test group without deploying to the App Store, you can just email around that APK. But nonetheless, that's what we get. That's what we want to deploy, and that that Android version is very important to us if we're deploying, because we can track how many people have a certain version of our application. So, intent filters, action, category, data, extras. And then remember, we also have the different things that can be invoked with an intent: an activity, like our camera, like our gallery view; a service, like GPS; and then also a broadcast receiver, which receives messages from the system, like plugged in charging and connected to Wi-Fi. And those broadcast receivers can help us achieve the design goals of make me amazing, enchant me, and simplify my life by reducing the number of manual tasks that the user has to do. So that's going to start us off. In our next video, we're going to see how we can use an implicit intent to invoke the camera in our mock-up Plant Places mobile app that we're deploying this term. We're also going to invoke a gallery view, and then in a future video, we're going to set up the Plant Places mobile search by color to receive intents. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We will see you in the next few videos. Thank you.